Hi, I'm Ian. Thanks for tuning in to another video episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. Today we have a really cool piece for you. We have a Sig AMT in 308. It's the civilian version of the StG45 adopted by the Swiss military in the 50s. And a real interesting, distinctive looking gun. So we'll take a look at it, we'll take it apart and see why it was designed the way it was and what works and what doesn't. So the Swiss designed this rifle with a lot of influence from German weapons of the past 20 years or so. It's a roller-locked gun, and well, let's just take it apart and see where we go from there. So we'll start at the back. Another German influence, you may recognize this from other guns like the MG42. To take off the stock, we open up this clasp, rotate it, and off it comes. So the stock assembly here has a captive recoil spring. So we don't have a separate spring that we have to maintain or find after we shoot it across the room. Now, you also may notice the Swiss keep this charging handle assembly. They've used that, I think that exact same charging handle back to about 1880. Pull, the charging handle comes off, and our really huge bolt assembly comes out. Take a closer look at this in just a minute. Now that leaves the trigger assembly. This is a captive pin. You have to actually push down on this side and then push the whole thing out this way. Once this pin is out, your trigger housing rotates down and comes off. The trigger on this rifle is actually pretty darn good. It's got a long take up at first, but then the second stage is crisp and pretty short. We also have a winter trigger on here, so that you can fire the weapon when you have big heavy gloves or mittens because you're in Switzerland and it's 50 degrees below zero up in the mountains. In the last piece then, we have our upper receiver and barrel assembly. There's not much going on here, not a lot of moving parts. Like I said, this is a roller locked weapon, so there is no gas system involved. It is simply a stamped upper receiver. There's a trunnion in here and connected to the barrel. So one other feature on the AMT that you don't see on other roller lock designs is right here. You can take this clip off and actually remove the machined locking shoulder where the roller locks into place. This allows you to repair a gun that's become excessively worn or change your headspace by changing the locking shoulders. On other designs, typically the only way to adjust headspace is to use different sized rollers. So let's take a look at the fire control group for the AMT as well as the standard military PE57. What we have here is a semi-auto only lower assembly from a US imported PE50 or US imported AMT, and then we have a full auto lower assembly from a Chilean contract StG47. So there's not a whole lot of difference between these two, as you can see, but what there is a full auto disconnector over here in the military version, which is not in the civilian semi-auto only version. In addition, our selector switch on the civilian is safe and single. And on the military version, it has a third position, safe, single, and full. Other than that, very similar. Alright, so next, let's take a look at the bolts. We have here our AMT semi-auto bolt. This is our Chilean military bolt. There is actually no difference at all between a full auto and a semi-auto bolt on the AMT. The bolt itself doesn't have any control over that function of the gun, so there's no need to change any of it. Now, one interesting thing here, if you read the literature on these, what you'll often be told is that they were a flapper lock that happened to look like a roller lock design. And you can see there's this square tab that appears to be connected to a roller. That, in fact, is nothing more than a way to get around patents on roller locks. This roller rotates freely. It is not actually connected to that square block at all. And this is in no way a flapper design. This is a fairly standard roller lock. Functions exactly like a German roller lock in an H&K or other design. Now, only the Swiss could come up with a contraption like this for an extractor spring, because that's what that is. It looks like an awful lot. It is in fact just tensioning for the extractor. If we take the bolt head off of the bolt body, we just remove this pin, like so. And you can see we have here our firing pin, and we have our camming surfaces. These are what lock the rollers in the open position. They push the rollers out like that, and then when the bolt body retracts, the rollers can come in and allow this whole thing to cycle backwards. What's interesting to look at here is to compare the rollers and the camming surfaces on the PE-57 to those on the HK91, which was really the progenitor of this rifle. The HK has this much, much smaller camming device, much smaller surfaces. If you look at the rollers, push that one out so we can see it a little better. You can see there's a huge difference in the size of the rollers. Now, the reason for this is the HK91 originally was designed as the system was designed for the 7x33 Kurtz cartridge, which is a much less powerful intermediate round. And then over a period of NATO development, the spec was increased to the 7.62 NATO, which is significantly more powerful. In order to maintain a required lighter weight on the rifle, H&K kept this bolt carrier and roller size fairly small. When the Swiss went and designed this gun, they designed it from the ground up as a full power 308 or 7.5 Swiss design, and decided that in order to make it safe and durable, they needed a much heavier mass in the operating mechanism. Another unusual feature here, because this is Swiss and they'll go and do something weird just for the heck of it, is that this hole is actually where the recoil spring in the buttstock puts pressure on the bolt. The firing pin is over here. The hammer actually hits this arm, which pushes the firing pin forward. So the firing pin runs inside here, and then there is this lever connecting to it, and that's what the hammer hits. Another element we can take a look at here is the muzzle and the gas block, or the front sight block, on the different versions of the SIG. The civilian version here in the back that was imported into the US has a fairly simple muzzle brake and bare ground-off front sight block. So this is intended as purely as a civilian sporting rifle. While the military versions of the gun had a bayonet lug on the bottom of the front sight block and had a compensator and barrel cut for launching rifle grenades. We can see here with the bayonet, snaps on like so. So there was also a bipod. This is standard on all the different versions of the PE-57 and the AMT. It's non-adjustable, folds up, but you don't have a way to adjust height on it. One thing you'll notice, of course, the PE57 was made in two different calibers. The Swiss military used it in 75 by 55 Swiss, and then the export versions and a couple of the military contracts, like the Chilean contract, were in 7.62 NATO or 308 caliber. So the original 7.5 Swiss magazines have a slight curve to them, where the 308 magazines are straight. One thing the Swiss did is they made the magazines identical length for both calibers. That way the receiver doesn't have to change between the two different types of gun. So in order to make a 308 magazine work in an overall length intended for a longer cartridge, they added this feed ramp to the nose of the magazine. So that's why this magazine appears to be a little bit longer than it really needs to be for 308, and that's why it has that feed ramp. That feed ramp also is a nice distinctive feature to help you identify what kind of magazine this is, if you happen to find one somewhere. So let's go ahead and put this rifle back together. We're going to start by putting the bolt back into the upper receiver. So you have to pull. When the bolt goes in, the bolt has to be fully forward like this so that the rollers will come inward. Yeah. And then we want the charging handle to go in. You can see this lug there. That's what the charging handle is going to engage against. We want the charging handle in front of it. This is a non-reciprocating handle, so it'll go all the way to the front, and the only time we'll use it is when we have to pull the bolt back. So the bolt goes all the way in. Then we can go ahead and install buttstock assembly. And the lower assembly. And there we are. So as I mentioned somewhat politely, the AMT is a rather characteristic looking rifle. There aren't a whole lot of other designs out there that look quite like this one. However, despite the awkward appearance, it's actually a pretty nice gun to shoulder. The stock is well set, both for shooting standing and for shooting prone. The trigger has a fairly long first stage, but the second stage is short and very crisp. It's a nice shooting trigger. The sights are pretty good. The civilian and export versions had this kind of an FAL-like adjustable ramp aperture sight. The original Swiss military guns had a fold-down, fold-up micrometer sight, very similar to what the Germans did on the StG42. Both of them used a rear aperture and a front post, and it makes a nice sight picture. And these are very accurate rifles, as you'd expect from the Swiss. So, my one complaint: the safety selector lever is nowhere near reachable from a firing grip, but if that's the worst I can come up with, that's not too shabby. So stay tuned. We will be doing some shooting with one of these out at the range. Probably not this one, it's a really nice example. But we will be doing some shooting and comparing the AMT to some other similar 308 rifles. So stay tuned, we think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for watching.